All right, I think everybody's settled. I've got the thumbs up from the great crew out there at the coat check. Thanks very much. And good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Alzheimer Society of Nova Scotia's Awareness Month panel event. My name is Paul Brothers. You may recognize me from Global News Morning. 6 a.m. is usually what's my go time. So I'm out here at 6:30 p.m. Hey, good evening. Thanks for watching. I've been up for a long time, so bear with me. I've got my notes with me this morning. 6 a.m. is prime time for me, so 6:30 p.m. is a little bit late, but I mean, always happy to share my time for such a worthwhile event. So thanks for asking me to be a part of it for sure. Tonight, I'm thrilled to be connecting with you all as we learn more about dementia and acknowledge January as Alzheimer Awareness Month. We've had a couple interviews on our show throughout the month about it, so hopefully you had a chance to catch that and learn more because, of course, as the theme is for tonight, knowledge changes everything. That's why we're here, because the more we know, the better we do. So we're hoping when you leave this event tonight, you leave with a few things. It might be steps you can take to reduce your risk of developing dementia. It could be a way to make your workplace more dementia friendly. I'll be looking at ways to do that for sure when I go back to work tomorrow. Or it could be a program or a service that's available to support those that are on the dementia journey as well. And for me, on a personal note, I have a mother who's in her early 60s. I've got in-laws that are in their 60s as well that are always talking about ways they can stave off Alzheimer's and dementia and things they're doing to stay fit mentally and physically. I've got a neighbor of mine who just this past fall kind of pulled me aside, and they've got, wonderful family, 3 teenage boys. And he says to me, my wife just got diagnosed with early onset dementia, early 50s. We've got 3 teenage boys. So what are we going to do? Where do we turn? And I said, well, I've done some interviews with the Alzheimer Society of Nova Scotia. I bet they would be a place to go to be a resource because, I'm sure people in this room are living with this journey and have gotten that news. You just need somebody to turn to. And that's why we're all here tonight is the sense of community that we can all feel by being together and learn more about what it's like to be on this journey and what services are available with some of our experts who are going to share some of their stories with us as well. So we look forward to that. Couple of housekeeping notes before we get into some of these presentations tonight that we're all looking forward to. The washrooms are just outside the Paul O'Regan Hall here at the top of the stairs to the right. So it says washrooms just above there. If you're watching virtually, by all means, go to your own washroom. I know there's hundreds of people across the province, so if you do have to step aside and use the washroom, hopefully you can do that. So to be more inclusive here in the room, if you've braved the elements here this evening, there is men's, women's, and gender neutral washroom as well. If you need a quiet space during the next couple of hours, you can stop by the Artful afternoon program and see some of the fine work that they've done. It's in the green room, which if you just go in behind here, I was in there just before this event started, some great pieces of art in there. It's located to the back of the hall. Melissa and Calandra are happy to greet you in the room, and you may see them on Global News Morning in the next couple of weeks or months as I'm scouting for interview segments as well. It's just a great initiative that they have there with the art gallery. As well, the Alzheimer's Society continues to follow Nova Scotia Health Authority's safe gathering guidelines as well. So we encourage you to wear masks and use sanitizer that's available on site when you came in this evening. And also thank you for respecting the choice of fellow attendees and ensuring that we have a successful, safe event here for the next couple of hours. So thank you so much for that. For our virtual participants, our moderated chat is available for questions, comments throughout the event as well. And before I introduce our first guest speaker, I'd like to welcome the Alzheimer's Society of Nova Scotia's CEO. His name is John Britton, and Alzheimer's Society's very first president, Kevin Keefe, to say a few words. John and Kevin, please come forward. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Paul. I've been told that I move around a lot when I speak, and for the benefit of our people that are virtual, apparently you need to be close to the microphone. So somebody give me a wave if you feel that I'm not close enough. Thank you, Paul, for that excellent introduction, and thank you for being our MC this evening. The only problem with having somebody like Paul being an MC is that somebody has to go after him. So I will try and make you chuckle, but I don't think I've got the natural charisma that Paul has. Really great to see so many people here tonight. Thank you so much for coming. As Paul said, we had 5 whole centimeters of snow today, but I think we're all got a little bit of sticker shock because we've had such a mild winter so far. So to those of you that did make it in person, thank you so much. And a big hello to those of you that are joining us online from across the province. I'd like to begin this evening with our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We are all treaty people. The Alzheimer Society of Nova Scotia understands our role in reconciliation, and we're working to implement the calls to action made by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. Furthermore, we acknowledge the people of African descent who have been in Nova Scotia for more than 400 years and the 52 vibrant African Nova Scotian communities in our province. The Alzheimer Society is committed to undertaking work to create collaborative and respectful relationships, and together our goal is to identify and develop tools that align with the beliefs and needs of Indigenous Nova Scotians, African Nova Scotians, and indeed all underserved communities. We're honoured to walk alongside Indigenous peoples and African Nova Scotians as allies in the elimination of racism from healthcare and across our society. Tonight's going to be an informative and inspirational evening for everybody, and I would like to extend sincere thanks to our panel of guest speakers for so willingly agreeing to be a part of this evening, and most importantly for sharing your experience and expertise. So thank you very much. I'd also like to thank our Alzheimer Society super team. I do go off script a little bit when I talk about the staff at the Society, simply because no lip service here. I do work with some of the most dedicated and talented people that I've ever had the fortune to work with. A great team of staff there. So please, if you do need some support, help or guidance, please don't hesitate to be in contact with us. So January is always an exciting and busy month for the Society, and you've probably seen it's been Awareness Month. We've actually had quite a lot of attention this month, which is great. And in fact, you've probably seen a TV interview or heard a radio interview with Sasha Nadeau, our Director of Programs and Services. And what we've been doing for Alzheimer Awareness Month is focusing on the 12 actions that everybody can take to improve brain health. Some of you who follow us may know that in the last 6 months or so, the first major study on dementia, the first major statistics on dementia in 12 years was released. It's called the Landmark Study. You can read all about it on our website. There was some pretty shocking news in the Landmark Study, stuff that we aren't really surprised at the Alzheimer's Society, but it does signal an 87% increase in dementia incidence in Nova Scotia in the next 30 years. There's also some really positive news in there as well, and that's why we're choosing to focus on the 12 facets of brain health for our Awareness Month, because the evidence does suggest that if we can delay the onset of dementia in the general population for 10 years, we will reverse the trend. So right now we're looking at 87% increase in numbers, but if we have a population-wide concerted effort to keep our brains healthy and we can reduce or delay the onset of dementia, we have a really good chance of working against those numbers. So something you'll be hearing a lot of about tonight, and something you'll be hearing a lot from us over the next couple of months. For those of you that are here in the room with us today, there is actually in your bag that you would have received when you came in, there is a handout with the 12 areas of brain health. And for those of you joining us online tonight, I'm not quite sure where the camera is, so I'm not quite sure where I'm looking. So look around. But those of you that are joining us online, there will be a link being posted in the chat region of the online platform. So we know that age is the #1 risk factor for developing dementia, and we can't modify our age, but as we've mentioned, there are things that we can modify. And the great news about the 12 modifiable factors for brain health are many of them will just improve your general health overall. And it's the things that we always hear whenever you go to the doctor and you're not feeling too great. What's the first thing your doctor ever says to you? Get more sleep, move your body more, watch your nutrition, drink more water. All of those things are very, 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 very viable when it comes to keeping your brain healthy. We've also got other things like challenging your brain, doing puzzles, staying socially active and socially connected, all things which will help potentially delay the onset of dementia. So if you do have questions about brain health, you'll see quite a few staff members around tonight, both in the hallway and in the room tonight. You can come and talk to any one of us if you have any questions this evening. We also have a fantastic service called Info Line, which is a province-wide help and support line. And that can be a one-off call if you have questions, or it can be repeat calls if you need particular support or help with any area of the dementia journey. So tonight does mark the end of Awareness Month, but there's a reason that we chose the 31st of January to have the event. Yes, it's right at the end of the month, so of course that's handy. But what's really special is that 40 years ago today was the very first meeting, and it wasn't even the Alzheimer Society. It was a group of concerned folks that were on the dementia journey, or those that had been on it, that realized that enough was enough and there wasn't enough support or help. So there was a really great meeting in a church basement, and that was 40 years ago today, which is quite special. So that's why we've chosen today for the event, and you'll see our 40th anniversary is going to be a big theme for us this year. So that's really, really special. And what else is really, really special is I'm about to introduce him, but we have our very first president of the Alzheimer Society with us today, Kevin Keefe. Kevin was actually in the room at that very first fateful meeting 40 years ago, and I'm sure we're going to hear a little bit about that from Kevin tonight. So as we move into our 41st year of service, we are still here, and we're committed to advancing the vision of those incredible individuals who started that society 40 years ago today. We've seen tremendous growth over the years, and we now have a staff of over 30 dedicated and talented people supporting thousands of Nova Scotians on the dementia journey. A lot of progress has been made, but we still have a huge amount of work to do. We all know that despite best intentions, that there are people out there that aren't getting the support that they need. All of us need to do better, and the Alzheimer Society is committed to doing that as we move into our 41st year of service. Our goal is that all Nova Scotians affected by dementia are empowered through timely, accessible, and culturally specific care, support, and information services. We really want to ensure that everybody on that dementia journey has help today, but most importantly, hope for tomorrow. So thank you as we enter our awareness evening panel, and I would now like to invite up to the microphone Mr. Kevin Keefe.
Thanks, John. I do remember that first meeting. It was very interesting. It was a little bit smaller than this meeting, but not by much. It was quite a good crowd at it, and it was primarily a support group meeting. And they, while it was on, they passed a little couple of sheets around with things that asking you to sign up for what you could do. Could you keep the books? Could you do this? Could you do that? And I remember I went down. My mother had Alzheimer's disease, and I was her caregiver and her guardian primarily. But we had a lot of help caregiving. But and she had early onset Alzheimer's. She was diagnosed when she was in her 50s, and passed away at 61. So it was a really tragic situation. She'd raised 7 kids, and from the Depression on, kind of thing. And when you talk about that group coming through, I was one of the in that era of the baby boom generation, and one of the early ones. And I'm now 73 years old, and there's a whole bunch just behind me that are coming, and I've been in business over the years, and basically I was in the business of serving that generation, just following their changes that they did when they got a little older. You went from serving draft beer to fine wines, and that sort of thing. And I've been chasing that thing all the way through, and now it's a totally new generation. But now we're at the stage where we're going to be getting it, and there's a lot of us out there. A lot of us here, anyhow, that first meeting was there were some couple of people there that were really the key factors in the society, and that was one by the name of Phyllis Horton and Constance Baird. They were Dr. Constance Baird. She was a professor in universities, and is quite the girl. And Phyllis was her husband Dell had Alzheimer's, and he was the former owner of Wood Motors out in down by the bridge there. But they were the ones that started it, and a lot of the stuff was going on. Did all the original organization, And they were the ones that sort of approached me, got me in a corner at the thing and with the sheet, and had you filled it with anything? I said, well, no, I can't really see anything here that I'm really particularly would be good at. And they kept saying, well, what about this? I said, well, that's the president. I can't do that. And anyways, I walked out of that corner the only way I can get out of the corner, I think, was by signing up for it. By surprise. But then on the drive home, I figured, well, I've been on a couple of other like trade organization boards and stuff like that. And I got a copy of Robert's rules. I know how to how to phone up an accountant and get one and get a lawyer and get all that stuff. So I can do that. And I went to work at that and got us incorporated and with a formal structure and all that. And I lasted for about 2 years, I think, and my wife was helping because it was all done in our dining room table. And a few other people came in, got involved, and some of them were, it was Claire, my wife, and Janet Alexander, Margie McKean was wonderful, and Maria Mancini, who was became president a few years later. And then their goal was to get an office and a staff and raise some money and that sort of thing. And what they did with me was they kicked me upstairs and sent me off to Toronto to go on the national board as a member because the national board was at the time struggling too. And I was up there for about 2 years, and almost the same thing happened to me. I ended up being president of the national board for about 4 or 5 years, I think. And then I was 5 years as past president, so I was there for 10 years. And I still went to some of the odd meetings here, but I wasn't that active, as active with it. But traveled the world on it, actually, because as president, I became the international vice president of Alzheimer International. And I went to conferences in Australia and all over France, England, where else? Ireland, Mexico City. That was another one. And Australia. And I met people from all around the world. But just for a second to go back to that first meeting, all of the people in that meeting, which would really move me the most, were all people like myself or like a lot of you that had a person with Alzheimer's at home and were dealing with it every day and were there looking for help or just a little bit of help. And it was quite moving. And so over the years, I just always tried to remember that first meeting, and from all the other traveling and stuff that I did on it, that was actually quite enjoyable. I enjoyed it. I met a lot of wonderful people from all over the world, and but it really all came back to that meeting. And when I was meeting these people around the world, they were all the same too. The same thing. It was all people involved. And it's lovely to see the society growing as much as it has here in Nova Scotia, because like I say, when it started, it was a blank piece of paper with a bunch of blank names on it. And now it's 40 years later. And I would like to thank everybody for inviting me here, and thank all of you for coming, for one thing too. And thanks for, I'll turn it back over to, you're the man, right? Thank you.
Actually, you're the man, but thank you. I appreciate it. Listen, I've been hosting my show for about 10 years now. And listen, that was a wonderful speech, by the way, Kevin. Thank you so much. But all good things start in church basements. 40 years ago, Alzheimer's Society, church basement. I just wrote down a couple. Phoenix Holiday Luncheon, I believe, started in a church basement. Parkinson's Super Walk idea, I think, was in a church basement. Rock bands have started in church basements. The ladies who made the food for my wedding reception made the food in a church basement. There's lots of connections. So all good things happen in church basements, and we're glad 40 years ago to the day that you were there for that meeting. Isn't that something? Here we are, January 31st. It's good timing to pick the date for this event for that. So before we get into our speakers, and we're going to have a Q&A session after the speakers as well, we do have to take one more moment to recognize that the society here has had a real commitment to helping families living with dementia over the past 40 years. And we have some families probably this evening, most of us here this evening, touched by this virtually and in person. So here's a video to celebrate board chairs, past, present, and future. Take a look.
My name's Kevin Keefe, and I was the first president of the Alzheimer Society of Nova Scotia. 40 years ago, there was a support group meeting for Alzheimer patients or Alzheimer families. I said, these people obviously needed me. I can do all of that stuff, get it registered, get a name, get a number, get the whole 9 yards. I was there because I was already through it, like I'd been there, done that. But everybody else in that room were right in the middle of it. And I looked around and I saw them all, and it brought it all back to me. I've got a relative with Alzheimer's at home. You don't have any time whatsoever to do anything. When I was involved with caring for my mother and everything, there was no support. There was nothing. She was at 61. She was really young when she had it. So one of the big things was always with the Prevention Society was awareness, creating the awareness of Alzheimer's, because almost everybody knew it. It was just one of the things that happened to you when you get older. We didn't have any kind of structure to begin with and all that, or funding or anything like that. 40 years later, you've got really well-organized, well-represented, highly visible organizations that are fighting for this. And that's a major success as far as I'm concerned.
It's amazing to think of how far the society has come, from gathering at a church in 1982 to becoming an organization of over 30 staff supporting thousands of people here in 2023. In addition to our support programs, we are also fully committed to supporting the research initiatives that focus on therapies and ultimately a cure. Until that day, the Alzheimer's Society will continue to be here for all Nova Scotians on the dementia journey. It's also important to acknowledge what hasn't changed. We are still struggling to ensure access to a timely diagnosis. We have well over 100,000 people in Nova Scotia without a family doctor, and accessing culturally appropriate support and even support for those who live rurally is still a major challenge. It's one we are committed to facing. Our services are needed now more than ever, and we invite you to be a part of it by supporting our work.
For 4 decades, the Alzheimer's Society of Nova Scotia has provided crucial programming and services, education, and support. They have been and will continue to be a partner as we look to the future and work to change the conversation about dementia in our province. And we do need to change the conversation, not only because the number of Nova Scotians living with dementia is set to almost double in the next 30 years, but because it can happen to me, to you, to someone we love, and likely to someone we know. We'd all like to hope the society won't need to be here 40 years from now. But today, we are needed more than ever, which is why our partners, funders, donors, and volunteers are at the heart of creating greater awareness, understanding, and impact. Please join us as we shape the future for Nova Scotians affected by dementia.
That was truly great. And I think we have past, present, and future board chairs right in front of us this evening. Why not give them all a round of applause and some great words in that video? Thank you so much for your time and your service. All right, let's get here for the knowledge portion of why we're here this evening. Knowledge changes everything. That's the theme. So we've got some experts here tonight who are going to pass along some knowledge that we can take home with us for sure. We're going to have time to answer some questions of all 4 of these panelists. So let's get into the first one. It's now my pleasure to introduce the first speaker of the evening. Let me first say that she's a super mom, mother of 3 small kids with a rock star husband who's at home with the kids tonight, so she could be here this evening. In addition to that, she is a geriatrician and assistant professor in the Division of Geriatric Medicine at Dalhousie University in Halifax. Originally from Cape Breton, she completed medical school, internal medicine residency, and subspecialty training in geriatric medicine at Dalhousie. Now, before medicine, she was a journalist, actually. It was with the CBC, not global, but okay. Yeah, I will still let her speak, I suppose. Hey, I'm kidding. I love the CBC. I'm just joking. Not as much as global, though. All right. Let me see. From publishing poetry and medical journals to columns in Doctors Nova Scotia magazine about medicine and also motherhood. If you get a chance, she wrote an article about trying to work from home with 3 small kids in 2020. It's hilarious. Well played. And when she's not running after those children, her clinical interests include dementia and movement disorders in older adults, and in particular Parkinson's disease as well. So let's introduce Dr. Alison Dixon. Dr. Dixon.
Thank you so much, Paul. We'll forget the fact that you're from Global and we can move forward with the evening, it'll be okay. Exactly. Thank you so much. Hopefully you can hear me all right. I'll try to position myself reasonably with the microphone, but thank you so much for having me tonight. I really appreciate being here. And it's an absolute privilege to hear about the beginnings of the Alzheimer's Society, to hear that story. It's incredible. I'll try to figure out the slide changing here. So green button? There we go. Tonight, I thought we could start with what is dementia, just to clear that up for everybody. How does it differ from normal aging? We'll do a brief look at the types of dementia, the numbers, how common is dementia in Nova Scotia and in Canada? And then we'll talk a little bit about dementia risk factors and prevention. So what we could all do tonight to support our brain health. So dementia is not a normal part of aging, and it's not just a memory problem. It's a progressive neurocognitive disorder, and it involves changes in one or more cognitive domain that affects your function. So it's not just memory. And I'll bring up a slide here that shows some of the different neurocognitive domains. So you see learning and memory is there, but we also have our language, how we find the words and choose the words we use, how we respond to language, our visual-perceptual memory and thinking, our executive function, which is really our organization, our planning, our dynamic thinking, how we have some mental flexibility is really through that executive function. We have complex attention and social cognition, so how we recognize emotion and our insight. And all of those domains can be affected, and the pattern is different depending on the type of dementia that someone has. So when we diagnose dementia in the clinic, it's a clinical diagnosis. We need perspective from the patient, but also from somebody who knows them well. And that might be a friend, a family member, a spouse, a sibling, a child. We need a full medical history and a physical exam. We do cognitive testing that I'll talk a little bit more about in the clinics to look at all of those different domains. So again, not just your memory, but to check your language, to check your visuospatial organization. And then we do a functional assessment. And we also make sure that reversible causes are ruled out. So that's why people who present with any concerns with memory or thinking have blood work to make sure things are okay, like liver function, thyroid function, vitamin B12 levels. We look for depression and mood disorders that can impact our memory and thinking. We look for other things like certain medications you might be on that impact memory and thinking, in particular pain medications, and even some medications for bladder incontinence. And we talk about substance use, and that's something that'll come up as a preventable risk factor as well. This is one of the screening tools we use, the mini mental state examination. It's just one simple example of cognitive testing that we do in the office and that family physicians and nurse practitioners do in their office. And this looks at some of our attention and calculation, our recall. It's a very language-based test, and then a little bit of visuospatial where people are copying a design at the end. So that's just an example of the type of cognitive tests that might be used. We also do a lot of clock drawing, which actually is quite a nice test, both for visuospatial organization and also executive function. And there's other tests that we do to assess different domains. Now, normal age-related changes shouldn't impact function. So finding out what people are doing at home and how that's changed is really one of the most essential things that we can do. And so we look at all of the daily tasks, whether that's driving, medication, how people are doing their accounting and finances, how you're doing your shopping, your cooking, your house cleaning. And we often ask, is there something that you could do, or is there something, we'll ask the loved one that you brought with you, is there something they could do 6 months ago, 3 months ago, or even a year ago that they can't do now because of memory and thinking? And that really is one of the more important questions that we ask when we're diagnosing dementia. So things like making mistakes with banking, not paying taxes, unable to manage your accounts like you used to, calculate tips at a restaurant, regularly forgetting medications. So not just the one-off time that we've forgotten our medications, but regularly forgetting or not even picking up new medications from the pharmacy, making errors with our driving, not following along with the card games we used to do easily, and not using your iPad anymore. Those are the kind of functional changes that we often ask about. And this is just a summary slide to show that in normal aging, we all have changes in our memory and thinking. There's changes that happen that are a normal part of aging. But when we have testing that we do and there's impaired scores, but you're still doing everything you used to do, no functional impact, we call that mild cognitive impairment. And then in dementia, again, it's the changes in those different cognitive domains that are impacting your function, not doing what you used to be able to do day to day. And that's what we call dementia. And we know for people who have mild cognitive impairment, about 10% per year will go on to develop dementia. So 1 in 10 go on to develop dementia per year, but that means 9 in 10 don't. And some people stay at mild cognitive impairment and some people revert actually back to normal age-related changes. So that's why it's really interesting for us to be talking about what we can do and the prevention type. So dementia, again, is the umbrella term that we use for the loss of memory and thinking that interferes with your function in your daily life. And under that umbrella is where we see Alzheimer's disease, which is the most common type of dementia we see. And then there's lots of other types, and this is just a little select bit, but there are lots of different types of dementia, whether it's vascular dementia caused by the small changes in the blood vessels in our brain, Lewy body dementia, Parkinson's disease dementia, Huntington's dementia, frontotemporal dementias, which have behavioral presentations or language presentations. So there's lots of dementias, and Alzheimer's disease is one dementia underneath that umbrella that we use. This is just another slide. It's from Australia, actually, but it's a very similar representation in Canada, which is why I show it. So the bulk of dementia that we see here would be Alzheimer's disease dementia. Actually, after that, the next most common would be mixed in Canadian clinics, and then vascular dementia, and then the others that you see up there, like frontotemporal dementia, dementia with Lewy bodies, younger onset Alzheimer's disease, and others. So there's quite a variety of types of dementia that we would see. But as you've heard already tonight, dementia is common. It's a very, very common condition. So you can see 590,000 Canadians living with dementia, and it's projected to reach close to 1 million in Canada by 2030. So those are some big, big numbers. In Nova Scotia right now, there are over 15,000 people living with dementia, and we all know some of them are some of them. And over the age of 85, nearly 1 in 4 have dementia. So a very, very common problem. And looking ahead, and this is some of the information from the landmark study that was discussed tonight, but by 2050, the number of people living with dementia will almost triple the 2020 level. So that means over 1.7 million Canadians will be living with dementia. That makes a huge difference, not just on a personal level for all of us, but also to our healthcare system. And you can just see as the age goes up over 80 there, the growth that we have by the darker blue, which is 2020, and then the lighter blue, which is 2050. So as I said, these projections have a huge impact for us personally, but also you can imagine the need for primary care providers will only increase. There are how many geriatricians right now in Nova Scotia? Maybe there are 10 of us. So most of dementia care and diagnosis is happening with family physicians and nurse practitioners, the primary care providers, and some through our care as well. But there's a huge need for primary care providers in our province. And there's also a demand on hospitals, as you can imagine, and it's always all over the news. But hospitalization rates are a lot higher, 65% higher for adults with dementia compared to adults without dementia. So we're caring for a lot of people with dementia in hospital, and that puts a tremendous strain on the healthcare system as well. We need to be prepared for that. So focusing on reducing our risk can really make a meaningful difference on an individual level to all of us personally, but also to the entire healthcare system. And I won't talk too much about care partners because I know this will come up later in the evening as well, but just to think about for every person we know for dementia, there's a whole community around them providing care. So by 2050, more than 1 million Canadians will be care partners for people with dementia, and that's equivalent to 690,000 full-time jobs. So for every person living with dementia, there's a family member or a friend who's providing an average of 26 hours a week of care for them. So this is a really significant amount of time and care that's provided. And that's something to think about as these numbers increase. So what can we do? We're going to talk about dementia prevention, and it also ties into living well with dementia. I think as well. So this is a paper from the Lancet Commission in 2020, and a lot of this data was used in the landmark study. And it showed us that modifying 12 risk factors may prevent up to 40% of dementia, which is just a mind-boggling number for a disease that we have no cure for. This is a beautiful graphic, I thought, from the Alzheimer's Society, the landmark study. If you start right in the middle, it talks about risk factor reduction, and we'll look at some of these individual factors and what can be done. But we look at risk factors early in life, mostly around education. And then as you come out in the curve toward midlife, we're talking about things like hearing loss, preventing traumatic brain injuries, looking at our blood pressure, and we'll talk about that, alcohol and obesity. And then as we expand over the top of this graphic, we're looking at risk factors in later life, like smoking, depression, social isolation, physical inactivity, air pollution, and diabetes. And looking at those risk factors, reducing the prevalence of dementia by 40%. So we'll talk about some of those specifically. Education. So we know that higher education levels are protective for our brain. And not just in early life, but actually lifelong educational attainment is protective for our brain. It reduces our risk of dementia. So lifelong learning is something that we could all do, and that's a very protective factor. It's something I think we're all doing a little bit of dementia prevention tonight, learning together. Blood pressure is so important. So this is something that, we should all be thinking about, going to see your primary care provider, checking your blood pressure. High blood pressure does a lot of damage to the very small blood vessels in the brain. So in the same way that it's bad for the heart, the kidneys, the brain also bears a lot of the brunt of high blood pressure over time. And the only known medication that exists that prevents dementia is treating high blood pressure if you have it. What a beautiful thing that we can do. So I encourage everybody always to go have their blood pressure checked and to have their blood pressure treated if it's high. Hearing loss is something we talk about in our clinic a lot. It's a risk factor for dementia, and this is something we can do something about. So we should all have our hearing checked. And if you need hearing aids, hopefully you will wear them, because it's a beautiful thing for the brain. And it's a direct effect on our brain anatomy, but also as a result of hearing impairment, we're often socially isolating ourselves. So it's a bit of a combined risk factor, but we know that hearing aids are neuroprotective, and that's for people who are trying to prevent dementia, people who have cognitive impairment and don't want to progress to dementia, but also people living with dementia. Having your hearing checked and wearing aids if needed is very, very important. quitting smoking. So you're never, ever, ever too old to quit smoking. At any age, if you're smoking, it's something to think about if you've thought about cutting back or quitting. So it's something we encourage. People are never too old to quit, and it reduces your risk of dementia, even if you stop at an older age. Traumatic brain injuries, so risk factor for dementia, in particular Alzheimer's dementia. So it's something that any activity that you do that's a risk, whether that's cycling, whether that's skiing, to try to wear the proper protective equipment. And it really is a cumulative effect. So the more head injuries over time would increase your risk. It's something we ask everybody about in the clinic if they've sustained major head injuries in their life. Exercise, as everyone can imagine, is very, very, very important. It reduces risk of Alzheimer's dementia, but also vascular dementia. Canadian dementia guidelines recommend exercise of at least moderate intensity. And really, it's important, I think, for everybody, but we know in particular people who have that mid-range that we showed on the slide between normal age changes, when people have mild cognitive impairments, so they're starting to have some reduction in some of those cognitive domains. It's a very important factor to prevent the transition into dementia. Diabetes is also something that you can imagine when we're talking about protecting blood vessels and things that are good for the heart. That is very important to look at. So we have to ensure proper diabetes control. And most of the studies looked at type 2 diabetes. And we know that the risk increases with the longer severity of diabetes and the longer duration. But the Alzheimer's Society, I thought, was a nice way to sum up the advice. What's good for the heart is good for the brain. And I think that's a very good principle that we could take with us. Social contact also increases cognitive reserve. It builds a cognitive resilience. So anytime that we can connect with groups of people, it's neuroprotective. Canadian dementia guidelines also say increase or maintain your engagement in cognitively stimulating activities. And what that means would be different for everybody. And it's best to find something that's meaningful for you and then hopefully do it with other people who find it meaningful too. So if you like to knit, find a group of knitters. If you like to walk or garden, can you garden with other people? And so there's no specific activity, and we're often asked about that. Is there something, some type of thing we can do on the computer that improves our memory, or that you can do cognitive games or brain training? But really we say find something that's meaningful and try to do it in a group. Sleep. Oh, it's a tricky one. So studies have shown that too little or too much increases risk of dementia. So we know sleep deprivation is not good, but also some studies have linked too much sleep to an increased risk. So we try to say target 7 to 8 hours nightly, an average night's sleep. The one thing I wanted to bring up is sleep apnea. So sleep apnea causes cognitive changes. That can be a reversible change. So it's something we ask about in the clinic when people present with cognitive issues. We try to screen for sleep apnea. And it also is a risk factor for developing dementia. So if you or somebody that you share a bed with has lots of snoring, choking, gasping, type episodes in their sleep, it's worth bringing up with your primary care provider, because sleep apnea causes cognitive changes and increases your risk of dementia. So treating that is very, very important. Nutrition. We're always asked about this as well. What vitamins, what supplements could we order that would be good for our health? Overall, the best evidence would be for healthy eating. The Canadian guidelines and the World Health Organization would say that probably there's a little bit better evidence for a Mediterranean diet. And what that would mean is just really more fruits and vegetables, a little less red meat. And the WHO says it might help and it does not harm. So we often tell people just to try to broaden out their diet, ensure there's some fresh fruits or vegetables in there, but there's no specific vitamin or supplement that we would recommend. Alcohol is a tricky one, as you've probably been seeing in the news lately. There's a lot of talk about what's safe and is there a safe amount of alcohol. It's a risk we've known for a long time, particularly for early onset dementia. And it's really risky, again, for that the people who are in that mild cognitive impairment zone, where you don't have dementia, your function is fine, but there are changes that are more than normal aging. And that's a particularly risky area to be. We know that heavy alcohol consumption causes damage to the brain. There's shows on MRI studies, volume loss in certain areas if people are drinking heavy amounts of alcohol, over 21 a week. And really from the Canadian Centre of Substance Use and Addiction, and this was talking about overall health and carcinogens, but they say that a low risk amount would be 1 to 2 standard drinks per week. So that's a big change from what's been talked about for many, many years. And it's difficult to wrap our minds around. So I think what they said, the less is better, is something that we recommend in the clinic too. If people are experiencing trouble with memory or thinking, and they are drinking alcohol, less is better. And you can interpret what that means to you. And I think with what we know about overall health as well and carcinogenic effects, it's important to think about your alcohol consumption. And this is just the graphic from the Lancet study in 2020. And I just liked it because it travels through our life stages where it starts the beginning talking about education. And then you can see in the blue circle up there, the midlife factors. The bigger the bubble, the bigger the prevalence of it as a factor. So the more important it is. And you can see in midlife, hearing loss is really big there. That's a very important one to address in our midlife, as well as looking at blood pressure, preventing brain injuries, looking at our alcohol use. In later life, the bigger risk factors you can see are for smoking. So thinking about smoking cessation even in later life, looking at depression. I didn't talk about depression because it's a bit of a tricky risk factor because we're not sure if it's treated or longstanding untreated depression that puts people at an increased risk. And the problem is that for some people, dementia presents like depression. So some people present with mood changes, they withdraw, their social isolation. And so we don't know if perhaps it looks like it's a risk factor because it's how the dementia was presenting. So I didn't bring that up tonight because it's hard to know how that fits in as something you can do. I think if you're having mood changes or there's depression is something you're dealing with, it's important to have that treated. We know that 1 in 4 people with depression experience cognitive changes. And so it's very important to seek out treatment and help for that. And it can improve some of the memory impairment that people experience when they're experiencing depression. And then we're looking at physical inactivity, air pollution, diabetes, all leading up to 40% potentially modifiable risk factors. So age is the biggest risk factor for dementia, something we can't modify. But thinking about the empowerment of 40% of risk factors that we could modify is, I think, important. We know as well from the literature that reducing more than one risk factor is key. So there may be a few things on that list to work on. And I think John Britton put it well, looking at the 12 actions for a healthier brain. So looking in your bag for that or going online, the Alzheimer website, alzheimer.ca is incredible, a wealth of information. But looking at those 12 tips for healthy aging and for a healthy brain, I think we can all take something away from that. So the take-home points tonight, dementia is not a normal part of aging. It's when memory changes or cognitive changes in other domains, not just memory, are impacting your function. You can't do what you used to be able to do because of memory and thinking, not because of pain or fatigue or walking trouble, because of memory and thinking. And it's common. We're looking at close to 1 million in Canada by 2030. We can make a major difference with risk reduction. And that difference is something we'll feel personally, the impact that care providers will feel, that caregivers in the home will feel. So I think the things tonight that we could do would be check your blood pressure, please. Quit smoking if you're smoking. Getting our hearing checked, all of us to start hearing screening, increasing our physical activity, being socially engaged, eating a balanced diet, limiting alcohol consumption. Less is probably better. And one of the really renowned geriatricians in Halifax that we're so lucky to have here, world-renowned, Dr. Ken Rockwood, he always tells people to move more, to eat better, and to do it in groups. And I think that's good advice for all of us. And what we can do truly can make a difference. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, that was a tough act to follow as well. Thank you so much, Dr. Dixon. You could have a career of voicing audiobooks or something. Just a wonderful, wonderful way of speaking in such a concise manner as well. Thank you so much. I'm sure people have questions to that presentation that you just heard. I know I do as well, especially when it comes to the new rules around the alcohol guidelines. We've talked a lot about that in our show over the past couple of weeks. It's really in the spotlight. We've actually got the Canadian Cancer Society on tomorrow morning that they launched Drive Feb, which is another kind of movement to limit your alcohol use. But that's for tomorrow, and this is for tonight. So we move on, and you'll have a chance to ask Dr. Dixon questions, both virtually and in person in just a few minutes' time. First, we need to welcome in our second speaker, actually speakers. It's the Archibald family who are joining us for some words this evening. I can introduce Dr. John Archibald. He's professor of biochemistry and also molecular biology and the Arthur B. McDonald Research Chair of Excellence at Dalhousie University. He's also the director of Dalhousie's Institute for Comparative Genomics as well. Our speakers, by the way, are very smart this evening. Basically, is what it's all boiling down to. Very smart people. So we're very lucky to be in the same room with them and virtually with them as well. One of the real big things that stuck out for me, I'm an avid cyclist as well. And I also like taking, negative or things that happen negatively in my life and doing something to motivate myself to turn that into a positive. And I believe that Dr. John is like that too. He was a care partner for his dad who lived with Alzheimer's. I'm sure he'll talk about that. But in July 2021, he embarked on the ride for dementia. So I'm sure most of you may know this already. He did a 9-day, 2,400-kilometer cycle around the perimeter of Nova Scotia, raising funds and awareness for dementia research, which deserves a round of applause, I do think. But I was said 9 days. What took you so long, man? Come on. 9 days. You must have took a couple of days off as a break or something. Anyhow, he'll give an introduction for his sister as well, who's come to speak to. So please welcome Dr. John Archibald to the event.
Great. Well, thanks so much for the introduction. Paul, we've decided we're going to do the whole ride again this coming summer. So just so you know. Yeah. So good evening, everyone, those in the room and those online. It's a real pleasure to be here. And on behalf of my family, thanks for the chance to speak from the caregiver and family perspectives. Yeah, as you'll hear in a moment, our dementia journey as a family began about 8 years ago. My father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and in 2021, this Cycle of Life project began to take shape, and it started really with with posts on social media to friends and colleagues just to find out people who had experience with dementia, and if they would be willing to answer a questionnaire. And I was taken aback by how common dementia is. I know that now. I didn't know that then. And also by the diversity of people's experiences as individuals and families. So the fundraising ride itself, I'm not going to lie, it was a soggy, miserable affair at times. But with the support of family and friends, I did make it around the province in 9 days, 2 more than planned. And it wasn't all bad. Occasionally the rain stopped and a strange shiny object appeared in the sky and served to lift my spirits, if not permanently, temporarily. The best day was the last day. It was July 9th. I had the chance as I was passing through Lunenburg on the way to Halifax, where I live, to visit my dad in his long-term care facility. And it was my sister, Martha, who's here on the stage, got to see Dad for the first time in 5 months. Now, the short-term goal of the ride was to raise money for the Alzheimer's Society and also the Maritime Brain Bank, and that was done via the Dalhousie Medical Research Foundation. And we did that. But the bigger objective really was to do our small part to encourage difficult conversations and to help reduce the stigma of dementia. There's a website, Cycle of Life and there you can find a series of blogs about my family's dementia journey, written by me, but also by my mother, Claire, who's here in the audience tonight, and one of my two sisters, Martha. And I'm going to invite Martha to the stage to say a few words.
Thank you, John. Yes. Let me start by telling you a little bit about Dad. He was friendly, gentle, kind, humble, and a generous man with a rational engineer's mind and a strong work ethic. He had an infectious, keen sense of humor, which served the family well on our 8-year dementia journey. Joel's diagnosis came in 2014. Members of our extended family had started noticing signs of forgetfulness in Joel and difficulties in his finishing sentences. Decision was made to seek help, and a diagnosis became an important turning point. It's so easy to put off this difficult moment, yet getting a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease gave Mom and Dad peace of mind and helped us navigate forward as a family. Dad took the news as well as could be expected, although making the huge transition to real acceptance of the disease took time. Caregivers have to make many adjustments to cope with much change in their lifestyle. A few of Mom's activities were set aside to make space for the unknown challenges ahead. Claire cared for Joel 7 years at home until a swift move into a long-term care home occurred during the COVID pandemic, where he would live for just under 2 years. Each of us, Alison, John, and I, spent time caring for Dad over the years. Afternoons, weekends, and occasionally a week or month-long stints would give Mom some respite. Our parents themselves were well prepared. Once Joel was diagnosed, Mom and Dad took advantage of services provided by the Alzheimer's Society of Canada, in particular, the program Shaping the Journey, Living with Dementia. It taught them about the psychosocial and physical challenges they would soon be facing and helped them make sound choices. They did their homework. We 3 siblings watched, learned, and helped to the extent that our busy lives would allow. Moving forward, as a family, we focused on meeting enjoyable goals. I recall a 2017 spring visit to the UK with my parents, particularly memorable. The journey got off to a rough start with a delay in Halifax. The key to traveling with Dad was to always leave plenty of time, add an hour or 2. Claire was flexible, finding a spot for Dad to lie down and anticipating his needs while we waited. Once we arrived, our Easter family gatherings were kept small. We spoke slowly, making regular eye contact with Dad whenever possible. John and I split up the care for Dad in 2018 when Mom visited the UK family. Mom left us with a notebook of listing foods, drinks, TV shows, and places Joel enjoyed visiting. We drove around exploring the community. We had a lovely visit with the rug hooking lady in Petite Riviere. The owner there knew my father from church. Her displays were colorful and joyful, pleasing to the eye and the soul. A visit to the Lunenburg waterfront, a drive down the river to the LaHave Bakery for a treat, and a trip to the beautiful shoreline of Crescent Beach. These were special times to be present with Dad. Over 8 years, Joel's cognitive abilities declined gradually, then more swiftly once he lost his writing skills and then his speech. Communicating became increasingly difficult. Decreasing verbal abilities were a source of frustration for Joel and the rest of the family. As the dementia journey progresses, it becomes increasingly difficult to avoid having to speak for and about our loved ones in their presence. Yet anything that can be done to include them in conversations, in social interactions, even passively with regular eye contact, is worth the effort for you and for them. As Dad's situation continued to evolve, routines and practices that had worked well even a few weeks back became problematic. Probably the most important caregiving lesson learned was this: be prepared to tear up the script at any moment. We found that as time went on, the need to give a flexible, adaptable care plan became increasingly important. We sensed frustration in Mom and Dad as they had learned to plan ahead around healthy routines, yet in the last stage of dementia, we found for us it was the best to embrace flexibility and acceptance of going with the flow. When transitioning to the long-term care home, providing a new caregiver's details of Joel's interests was important to help with the shift. We focused on what Joel could still do. Listen to music when the events came to the community room, spend time outside in the garden, enjoy a snack, and listen to family stories. One thing we did as a family was prepare Dad's memoirs as a picture book with large text, calling out family under the photos, including their relationship to Dad, so anyone, including caregivers, could read the book with Joel. This allowed us to revisit parts of Dad's life with him, tell stories, and look at pictures together. I so cherish looking at the memoirs with Dad and him pointing to his name in large bold letters on the cover. Dad had such a good sense of humor and a very positive attitude. For Mom, one particular visit stands out. When she arrived, Dad said, "What shall we talk about today? The ceiling?" Mom burst out laughing and said, "Well, what about the chest of drawers?" They both had a good chuckle. They were making the best of a difficult situation. Staying positive was crucial. Dad's personality was one of acceptance. He was generally peaceful and would joke with the Harborview Haven caregivers quite a bit. Even after he lost the ability to communicate verbally, his personality still managed to shine through. He could tell a joke with his eyebrows and facial expressions. That was his superpower. It's up to each of us to keep a positive attitude and remain curious about all life around us. In our community and our environment, pain requires presence, which is the opposite of denial. People feel relief when they have a witness and acknowledgement of their stories. We can help each other by being present and telling our dementia stories, letting others know that they are not alone on the path. This helps people to face their fears and realities in their life around them. There are people and groups who will listen and help navigate us through the dementia journey. Time for you.
Thank you, Martha. So Martha mentioned Shaping the Journey. This is a cover of Dad's program workbook, and my parents each had a copy, and they progressed through them, those books separately. And the answers and notes that Dad wrote in his book provided a really interesting window into his thoughts and feelings shortly after he'd been diagnosed. It's something that we cherish, and participation in the program was huge. It helped my parents understand what to expect as Dad's disease progressed, and it gave them useful coping strategies. And with the help of the society, they learned about and participated in support groups that were helpful for both Dad and for Mom. And as Martha said, my parents were prepared, and it helped a lot. And knowledge really does change everything. So Mom and Dad had many good years together living at home. Around mid-2020, Dad's health started to decline. And by February 2021, he required considerable care, both day and night. And that was when Mom wasn't able to get the sleep that she needed and started to experience caregiver burnout. Now, Dad had been on a wait list for long-term care for some time. And with the help of continuing care, they were able to find a spot for Dad. He moved in on February 26th, 10:20 a.m. We dropped him off at the front door into the welcoming arms of the staff there. Due to COVID and other factors, we weren't allowed to go inside with him. And despite our best efforts to prepare him for that moment, he didn't quite understand what was happening. The transition to long-term care can come with a lot of anxiety and guilt, feelings of isolation and frustration, both for caregivers and the people who look after them, the caregivers and the people with dementia. We were told by healthcare workers that it would probably be harder for mom than for dad, and that turned out to be true. But again, with a commitment to education, we made the best of the situations that were presented to us. I want to underscore that everybody's dementia journey is different. The path it takes is shaped by many factors, only some of which actually have to do with the manifestations of the disease. There's family dynamics, cultural differences, financial matters. All of these things impact the decisions that families make. So I want to be clear that long-term care, it may not be the right solution for everyone, but it was the right one for us. I had actually never set foot inside a long-term care facility until Dad moved in. It took some getting used to. As you might expect, Mom found it difficult to put Dad's care in the hands of others. And the best thing to do really was to just get used to expecting the unexpected. You never knew whether Dad was going to be on a good day or a bad day. Many visits were a complete write-off, but others were magic, and those are the ones that you remember. So it was a glass half full approach, I'd say. And when things got difficult, we really tried to remind ourselves of two facts: and that Dad was safe and he was comfortable. And it didn't matter if we occasionally arrived to find him wearing someone else's hoodie or 2 left slippers, or that his glasses were missing. What mattered was he was well cared for and treated with dignity and respect. Over the years, one question that came up in discussions with family and friends, does your dad still know who you are? And at first it was a clear yes. Then it became a sometimes, and that moved on to not really, or I'm not sure. That during the progression of the disease, you have this situation where age and names of people, it becomes fluid, and there's this the facts are blurring into this haze of familiarity. And this was discussed in a super book by someone named Mike Barnes. It's called Be With: Letters to a Caregiver. It helped me personally to adopt a more positive note, a positive take on my evolving relationship with Dad. It was hard at first for him to ask me what my name was or where I lived. COVID masks, they didn't help. But I eventually realized that, exactly who I was to Dad didn't really matter either. As his words and sentences became less intelligible, I found it more helpful to just nod and smile and say, okay. And so what was important was my voice was familiar to him, and that I tried to be where he was at when I visited. I tried to be with, as the book says. I think it helped Dad, and I know it helped me. So July 6th was the hardest day of the cycle of life. 400K from Amherst to the Valley, and I was getting pretty tired by that point. By the time I got in Windsor, it was getting dark. My lights on the bike started failing. And a friend of mine was driving the car behind and lighting the road. And I crawled through Hansport, eventually got to Wolfville after 11 at night. Long day. The first thing I did in the hotel, I logged on to Facebook and I let friends and family know that I was off the road, which was important. And then I saw a post by a friend named Vicky who had been tracking my progress online. And she said that earlier that evening I had ridden past the homes of several families that she knew whose lives had been impacted by dementia. And that got me thinking. And I did a back of the envelope calculation based on the fact that 500,000 Canadians currently live with dementia and 1 in 5 have experience as a caregiver, or professionally and or personally. And so I reckoned that the inhabitants of roughly every 5th house that I passed that night and every other day of the ride had been impacted by dementia in some way. Every 5th house. And I thought about that for the rest of the ride. And I've been thinking about it on and off ever since. And it motivates me to speak openly about dementia every chance that I get, in the hope that it reduces the stigma associated with the disease, which eventually helps people get the help they need when they need it. So no matter where you are on your own dementia journey, I encourage you to do this too. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was powerful stuff right there from the Archibald family. We thank you so much to Martha and to John for those words and getting to know your dad, Joel. Seemed like a very cool man for sure. And having lost my dad about 12 years ago to cancer at the age of 53, I know what it's like. And it never gets easier. And it's really hard to talk about as well. So thank you for being so brave to share those words with us tonight and reducing that stigma and raising the awareness and funds that you've done, John, on that ride. Unbelievable. So another round of applause, I think, for John and Martha. And I got some more biking practice to do to ride with you, pal. So that's a lot of kilometers, but we'll get there. All right, on to our final presenters of the evening, who are both Alzheimer's Society staff, and I've had a chance to meet a lot this evening, all doing great work, and thanks for having me here tonight. We'll start with Chelsea Slawter-Wright. She's an African Nova Scotian woman born and raised in Halifax with family roots in Preston Township and also in Beachville. She is the coordinator of education and engagement for African Nova Scotian communities. I should also acknowledge tomorrow, February 1st, is the beginning of African Heritage Month here in Nova Scotia. So by all means, take advantage of any events and programs throughout the month and all year long. It goes without saying, but February especially. So when engaging with the community, Chelsea provides dementia education and information about society's programs and services. She is a certified therapeutic recreation specialist and has worked within Nova Scotia Health as a recreation therapist and a therapeutic assistant as well, supporting many patients living with dementia and their families. Outside of work, Chelsea stays involved in her community, coaching girls youth basketball at Armbray Academy High School division and with the Mega Summer program as well. So now I've got to ride with John. I've got to play basketball with Chelsea. We got a busy time coming up here. And also Beth House is with us this evening. Beth is the Dementia Friendly Communities Lead for the Alzheimer's Society of Nova Scotia. In addition to this role as well, she also facilitates education, delivers public presentation, and supports clients on the Society's info line, of which you heard about as well throughout the night. With a therapeutic recreation background specializing in geriatric populations, Beth spent 20 years working in long-term care, enhancing quality of life for the residents that she served. Now, Beth has held various volunteer roles on provincial therapeutic recreation boards and also with the Nova Scotia Horticultural for Health Network, which explains horticulturally, when Beth is not working, she's busy in her garden, or with her husband, 2 kids of which are teenagers, she tells me. I'm not sure they're kids anymore, Beth, but it says kids, and dog Rory. So please welcome to the event tonight, Beth and Chelsea.
So I get the pleasure of speaking first, and then Chelsea will tell us a little more about the programs that we have at the Alzheimer's Society. So thank you very much. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you for joining us in person, and thank you to our virtual audience as well. We have people from across the province. I'm sure we have out of the province as well. So it's marvelous that we have so many people hearing the wonderful stories and hearing the knowledge that was shared tonight. I'm going to speak to you a little bit about dementia-friendly communities. So we heard from each of the speakers before me tonight how important community is. Not only the community that surrounds someone who is on the dementia journey, but also their involvement in the community, staying socially engaged, staying cognitively active, staying physically active. Communities are important at any age in life, but especially when you're on the dementia journey. But first, why would we want to become dementia friendly? Well, thankfully my stats line up nicely with Dr. Dixon's, the stats that will come here eventually. Oh, I have to do it. That's right. What are we doing here? Okay, so why do we want to be dementia friendly? So there are about 16,000 Nova Scotians who have dementia as of the 2022 stats. The landmark report shows us that between 2020 and 2050, there's a projected increase of 87%, nearly doubling to over 28,000 Nova Scotians living with dementia. In 2022, there are an estimated 9,600 Nova Scotians providing unpaid care to their family and friends, community members, neighbors living with dementia. And this accounts for over 13 million hours of unpaid work per year. And this is a big stat. Over 46% of Canadians admit that they would feel ashamed or embarrassed if they had dementia. So why is becoming dementia friendly important? Oops. There we go. Well, we'll stay there. So given Nova Scotia's emphasis on supporting adults to live at home as long as appropriate, it's vitally important to ensure that communities have the tools to support this goal. Specifically, older adults with dementia should be supported in the places where they live, where they work, with the services and the organizations in which they and their care partners interact. This contributes to the ability to live with dignity and respect in their various communities. And we heard how important that was for the Archibald family. When organizations, businesses, and municipalities and the general public become more dementia friendly, more dementia inclusive, it not only ensures that people can age in place, but also remain active members in their communities. Dementia-friendly principles, both social and physical, which we'll talk about, are not only dementia-friendly, but make spaces more inclusive, supportive, and accessible for everybody. Businesses and organizations and members of the community that are respectful and responsive to the needs of people affected by dementia are valued and integral to building a dementia-friendly society. It's our social responsibility to support all members of the community. So again, 46% of people, of Canadians, would be ashamed or embarrassed. That is why it's important to work towards a dementia-friendly community and to reduce the stigma. So a dementia-friendly community supports, respects, and includes people living with dementia and their partners in care in the places they live, work, and play. It's a community that values contribution, opportunity, and choice. It's your community. So there is a National Dementia Friendly Canada project that has been funded by the Public Agency of Canada, and it concentrates on building general awareness, developing resources, and sector-specific education. The project has created tip sheets, which are available at our table tonight, so you can pick some up if you haven't on your way in. They're creating videos, online education, a national awards campaign, and toolkits to support provincial initiatives. The provincial dementia-friendly community initiatives, they look different province to province and tend to focus on growing relationships with specific groups, organizations, municipalities, in order to encourage them and help them become dementia inclusive. So again, we have all the tip sheets at our booth. And for those of you joining us online, we will have the website, but there's a Dementia Friendly Canada website as part of the Alzheimer's Society website. And you can access all the tips and videos there. So we've had several nominees for the first Dementia Friendly Canada Awards, and you may have noticed them in the pre-roll slideshow that happened here. And we even have a winner from one of the categories right here in Nova Scotia, the Memory Cafe Nova Scotia. So that is a marvelous, wonderful, successful program that is popping up in communities all over Nova Scotia. One of the videos created will give an example of a library interaction, and I'm going to show that tonight. And though we don't charge fines for seniors here in Nova Scotia, you can see how a similar interaction may play out here.
I can't believe you're charging me late fees. You never sent me a reminder, and it doesn't say anywhere it was due last week.
I know she received a reminder last week, but Isha is a longtime patron and her partner let me know she was recently diagnosed with dementia. So I'm not going to argue with her. Instead, I'm going to acknowledge her frustration and connect, not correct. I understand why you're frustrated. Let's get this sorted out and then find the best way to get a reminder to you next time.
There are simple actions we can all take to include and support people living with dementia. To learn more about what you can do, please visit alzheimer.ca/dementia-friendly-Canada.
So you heard him say connect, not correct. You also heard the Archibald family talking about connecting and not correcting. And some of the other things that we can do is creating dementia-friendly design. So part of that is looking at what's around and looking at it with a new sense of eyes. And the considerations go beyond the usual accessibility requirements for, say, physical disabilities. They also consider the cognitive changes that people living with dementia may be experiencing. Small changes in a physical space can make a big difference in making an environment feel safe for someone living with dementia. A welcoming environment, both indoors and out, can help a person living with dementia continue to access offices, stores, businesses, public recreation areas. There are many best practices that you can consider, and most are relatively low cost and can benefit everyone, not just people living with dementia. And we have a tip sheet for that as well. So some of the physical environment changes that you can make with signage. So challenges with memory may make retracing a path or wayfinding difficult. So consideration for the design and placement of signage can help to ensure that spaces are welcoming and easily navigated. Clear signage for finding your way around should have a high contrast between the text and the background and a nice plain bold font. As beautiful as those fancy scripts are, they can be difficult to read. And they should be placed at eye level and at key decision points and right on the doors that they refer to, not beside them. Entrances and lighting, well-lit, wheelchair accessible entrances and walking routes should utilize natural light as much as possible and avoid pools of bright light or dark shadows. Clearly marked entrances and entrances that are understood as an entrance, and glass doors that are clearly marked. I know some of my family members have walked into screen doors as well as windows. Flooring, a shiny floor may look wet. Flooring should be plain. Mats could be a tripping hazard. Seating should be recognizable, not abstract. If we're outside of a library, a book that looks, or bench that looks like a book is beautiful, but it might not be practical, and let people know that they can sit on it. And armrests and seating colors that contrast with the floor make for a better seating. Washrooms that are well marked, all family or gender and all family restrooms can help make a embarrassing situation a little less embarrassing. Background noise. It can be difficult for a person living with dementia to filter out background noises such as radios, TVs, or other conversations, just like it is for someone who lives with a hearing aid. And surfaces. Dementia can make it hard for a person to interpret what they see. So for example, patterned flooring and wallpaper may also be confusing. Dementia-friendly interactions are another way that we can make our communities more dementia inclusive. And so what does that look like? So again, we have a tip sheet for interactions and is one for behind masks. So you can enhance your communication by doing things such as facing the person, making eye contact, or put yourself at eye level if the person is uncomfortable with eye contact. Offering appropriate help, approach from the front in a friendly and open manner. Support the person's reality, where they are, connect, don't correct. Recognize how the person might be perceiving the situation. So all of these tips and many more are on the Dementia-Friendly Canada tip sheets that I've already mentioned. And so our goal, there we go. Our goal is for people living with dementia to be supported, respected, and included in their communities. So this is a big task. So where do we start? Well, we're going to start with a few key audiences. One of those might be the library, which is the hub of many a community. Could be first responder groups, which have shown a very keen interest in learning more about dementia and wayfinding. And so what can you do? We have a tip sheet for how to be a dementia friend. Learn about dementia, call us, ask questions, talk to people in your communities who are living with dementia, volunteer with your Alzheimer's Society, participate in events such as this one. And so now I'm going to welcome Chelsea to share some of our programs and services. So if there are questions after tonight, you can check out the website, which the Dementia Friendly Canada website, or you can email me or give me a call.
This is a fancy clicker. I like this one. Hi, everyone. I'm Chelsea. I have the pleasure of telling you all about the programs and services that we do have. So we've heard from our past, present, and future chairs about how the society started and where it's going. So we thought it'd be great for everyone to know about what programs we actually have going on now in case there's anything that people are interested in and new things coming out and kind of where we are today. So who are our clients? So we support any and everyone, people with dementia, people supporting those with dementia, healthcare professionals, and all types of care partners. So the person with dementia is always at the center of what we do, but we consider dementia to be a family disease. As the disease progresses, the person with dementia becomes more dependent on family and caregivers and other care partners. And so we consider each person to be equal priority in regards to the programs that we have and the way that we support. An important part of our mission is to also promote public awareness about the disease and the impact on the individual, their family, and the community. So we've heard about dementia-friendly communities from Beth, as well as the Archibald family and how they engaged with the community along their journey. And so we're really working to be an inclusive organization where all Nova Scotians feel a sense of belonging. And so you might have noticed in the revolving PowerPoint of slides where it talked about our idea work and the other partnerships that we have with other organizations to ensure that we can connect with all communities about the services that we have. So you may have saw the Health Association for African Canadians, Réseau Santé, ISANS, and we also collaborate with Mi'kmaq communities through various community leaders. So I've divided our programs in two groups. So the first is our programs for people living with dementia. So one of those programs is Shaping the Journey, which John talked about his parents both participating in. And so that's a 6-week program for people who have recently been diagnosed with early stage dementia and a partner in care to attend together. The program provides the opportunity for individuals to learn more about dementia and connect with others who are going through similar experiences and to prepare for the future. We also have coffee and conversations, which generally is kind of a following program to Shaping the Journey. And so this is a support group for persons with early stage dementia, and it's a 6-session program that is guided by an Alzheimer's staff, where persons with dementia can receive peer support and discuss with others who are going through similar situations. We also have Connections Hub, which is a virtual social support group. We do have a staff member who is in attendance, but this program is more just for the social connection and for people being able to chat with each other. So it is unstructured, but it's a safe environment for members to benefit from peer interaction. And then we also have Artful Afternoon. So I think a lot of people here who are in person saw our exhibit in the back with Melissa and Calandra. So Artful Afternoon is a partnership program that we've done with the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia. The program creates a space for people with dementia and their partners in care to connect with art. The program is offered virtually across the province, as well as in person at the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia for people living in the Halifax region. Both the visual and in-person programs are dementia friendly and focus on fun, creative, and social interactions amongst participants. There's no prior experience in art needed to attend this program, which is something people generally ask. So you don't have to be an artist to come, but you'll leave with some new skills. And so next are our programs for care partners and healthcare professionals. So our family caregiver education series is also a 6-part series for people living with dementia, more so their caregivers. And so each series are 6 sessions that are 1 hour, and they're each on a different topic, covering an overview of dementia, symptoms and diagnosis, planning for the future, day-to-day experiences, communication, taking care of oneself as the care partner, changing needs, and tougher issues. And so if you aren't able to attend those online or in person, we do have recordings on our YouTube channel that can be watched at any time. And you can always call us if you have any questions after watching, and we can support you through that. We also have support groups for care partners. Trying to go quickly here. I'm going to skip some of this stuff. So as of now, January of 2023, we have 16 support groups happening in Nova Scotia. We have 10 in person and 6 that are virtual across the province. We also do alt-ed sessions. Those are happening every few months, and they are virtually. They're open for anyone to join, and each one is about an hour long, and it's a different topic, and they're also recorded and on our YouTube channel. And our last thing, which is a big one for a lot of our clients, is our info line. So for any of the programs that I've just talked about, you can call our info line to get signed up, to get connected. And so through our info line, we support everyone with any questions that you might have around dementia, whether you're noticing something new with someone in your life, whether you have a diagnosis yourself and you have questions about what's to come ahead, or navigating the healthcare system and finding programs and services in your community. So I will leave it there. That's our info line number. You would have gotten a lot of some of this info in your bags when you came in, and virtually you got it somewhere, but you can always call us at that 1-800 number if you need more information. Thanks.
Thank you so much to Chelsea and Beth for going through some of the programs and services from the Alzheimer's Society as well. Really informative there, I'm sure, for people in the room and virtually as well. Some great panel discussions here tonight. Hopefully you were engaged in them as much as I was over the past couple hours. Just unbelievable how they kind of complemented each other, from Dr. Dixon's very informative presentation on the figures and the risk reduction and the things we can do now. Then the Archibald touching story, of course, of a family going on the journey, and then some of the programs and services that are available if you're on that journey to help you out and kind of strengthen that community ties as well. So we are going to get into the question and answer portion of things now. So if you're in the room, I can come to you with a microphone if you'd like to ask one of our panelists a question tonight. Oh, we got a hand already. This is great. Usually it takes a few minutes to get a question going, but we're up against it for time a little bit. I'm not sure how much time you want to allot for the Q&A, but we can do this on the fly. I have nowhere to go for the next 7 or 8 hours. 6 a.m. comes early, but whatever. I can sleep here. So you can ask questions virtually, I'm told, as well. But first, we'll open it up for those in the room. So I will get the questions rolling here. Oh, sure. I'm not sure. All right, John will do it. This is great.
I'll be the runner. It's all good.
Great, thanks very much. I guess I have 2 quick questions. You talked about the number of people diagnosed in Nova Scotia as, I think it was 26,000 some odd numbers for this year. So that's great. Well, not great, but how many people are undiagnosed that we don't know about, which is probably to me the more important question. And the second question is that with genetics, what does genetics play in the with Alzheimer's? And the reason I ask that question is my mother had Alzheimer's early onset diagnosis. She passed away in her early 60s. So I have 2 brothers who are both diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So, so what does genetics play the thing? And obviously with the genome projects going on today, will that have any effect on helping people getting diagnosed with Alzheimer's quicker and hopefully with a cure? Thank you.
Those are great questions. I could start and then see if anyone has anything else to add. The first question, I wish I knew a number about how many people are undiagnosed, but I imagine there are quite a lot, and mainly for access to services. So people without a family doctor and maybe who, wouldn't have access to a geriatrician, and depending where you're living in Nova Scotia, who knows what your access might be like in those ways. And also the stigma that was talked about tonight. So people feeling perhaps ashamed or private about it and not wanting to bring it forward. Also, a lot of times we rely on somebody in the family who is the person to bring it forward, not the patient themselves or the person with dementia themselves. So if you're living alone, you can imagine that it would be a lot harder perhaps to bring that diagnosis to light and to understand how to navigate the healthcare system to have that diagnosis. So I wish I knew how many, and I don't know the answer for you, and maybe Alzheimer's Society does, but I think there are quite a lot, to be honest, a whole lot. Your second question, which is a very, very good question. Genetics are important as a risk factor, age being the most important risk factor, and then genetics after that. And particularly, like you mentioned, in earlier onset dementia. So we know particularly for younger onset Alzheimer's disease would be one, some of the frontotemporal dementias, that genetics play a more important role. So it increases risk for sure. And that's why I think thinking about risk reduction in other ways is very important. But we also know that it's not the whole picture. So some people have genetic changes and inherit genetic alleles that make them predisposed to dementia and never develop dementia. And some people develop dementia that don't have any genes that would put them at higher risk. And we know as well from looking at brains, which I'm sorry to talk about, I'm talking about brains, but we know that some people will have the pathology that looks like Alzheimer's in their brain and have never presented with the symptoms of that disease. So there's more to the picture than just the pathology and genes and brain changes, but it is an important risk factor, and it's certainly something we take seriously. So for people in clinic that we see, we always ask about family members with dementia, particularly first-degree relatives, and particularly younger onset. So if someone in the family developed dementia at later life, it wouldn't be as worrisome a risk factor as a younger onset, but it is a very important factor. And I think it's something we'll hear more and more about in the years to come. Absolutely.
I was just wondering how we fare versus the rest of Canada or the world in terms of, are we worse or are we okay?
Does anybody else want to talk about?
I can talk a little bit about like Canadian statistics.
Yeah, yeah. Do you mean in how many people have dementia? Yeah, that's a very good question. And Beth can probably talk about some of the statistics, but we do have an older population statistically. So it means that we do have quite a few people living with dementia, as you can imagine. And that's an important distinction depending on the age of the population.
Yeah, so we're already coming up on that curve of increasing. So we're at about 87% by 2050. There are some provinces who are at 200% by 2050, but they have a much younger population. So we're already seeing a high degree of people living with dementia as opposed to some other provinces. So across Canada, there are almost 600,000 Canadians living with dementia. And it's going to double by 2030 to over 900,000. And there are also 28,000 Canadians under the age of 65 living with young onset dementia. So does that answer?
It does. I'm just wondering something in the atmosphere or
is there something in the water?
I
would
think
say
age would be the biggest factor in our
Yes.
population. And really, we know that air pollution is a risk factor, and certainly compared to some of the big urban centers, we would have less exposure, when you think about environmental risks. But in terms of an age-related risk, that's what would put us with a bit of a bigger group here. But I think in terms of access to services and supports and the Alzheimer's Society here and the medical care that people receive, I think we're very fortunate in Nova Scotia to have the resources and the community we have to help people living with dementia. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, exactly. That's a very good point. The amount of research that comes out of Nova Scotia for dementia is absolutely astounding. We have the brain bank here, which we're talking about brains again, but we look at brains. We have brains here. There's a lot of very detailed lab studies going on that advanced dementia knowledge across the world. We have geriatricians here and neurologists here that are world-renowned in dementia research. And that is huge. I mean, people come here from all over Canada to learn with people like Dr. Sultan Darvish, Dr. Ken Rockwood, Dr. Melissa Andrew. It's incredible, the minds that we have here in dementia research. It's something I'm very proud of, and I think we should all be proud of.
Time for some more questions. Oh, Sasha has a question virtually, I would say.
Yeah, we have a number. First, I'll say there's a number of compliments from our virtual audience thanking all of the speakers tonight. So I'll start with that. And 2 follow-up questions. One is, who's more likely to develop dementia, men or women? And the other follow-up question is, are there any treatments available?
Sorry, you have to hear me talk a lot tonight, and I apologize. Women are more likely to develop dementia, and it's something that's not fully understood. For a long time, it was thought because women lived longer than men that explained it, but that's not the whole picture, and there's a vulnerability that's not quite yet understood, but it's a topic of a lot of interest and a lot of research. The second question, and I'm forgetting it, Sasha, and I apologize. Treatments, yes. So we don't have any disease modifying treatments at this point in time. So there's no cure for dementia. We have treatments that improve the symptoms of the disease. So things that can improve some of the symptoms, whether that's the memory changes or the function that improves the overall function. But unfortunately, we don't have anything that stops the disease, cures the disease at this point in time. Lots of research in that area, lots.
Here's a couple back here.
Thank you very much for a wonderful panel and how informative it has been. But I'm someone who suffered a stroke 3 years ago, and I'm wondering, and with the increase in strokes that's going on now across the country, one every 5 minutes, actually.
Absolutely.
What is the relationship between stroke and dementia? Do you see any trends or anything that we should be aware of?
Absolutely. So we do see a lot of stroke-related dementia, and that could be people who've had a major stroke, so a big event that's been identified and that results in cognitive impairment after that. And there's also people that present that have never had a big stroke, but have a small collection of what people call, sometimes people say mini strokes, but really it's small vessel changes, but related to impaired blood flow into those small areas of the brain that present with a dementia as well. But certainly vascular dementia, which encompasses both the big post-stroke dementia and the small brain changes, are something that we see. And that's why most people who have memory and thinking changes will end up having a CAT scan at least, and guideline-based would say MRI, although we don't have that kind of access, unfortunately, all the time, to have brain imaging to see if they've had small strokes or larger strokes before. But it's certainly something we see, and it presents with a slightly different pattern than an Alzheimer dementia generally does. Yeah, absolutely. It's a very good point. Thank you.
Excellent question. You mentioned we still don't have a cure, but I'm curious, how close are we to getting a cure? Who's doing the most advanced research in that field? And is there any indication amongst you, the scientists, as to when we might see a drug or a cure for dementia?
I think, I wonder if anybody else has any input in that too. I couldn't tell you a timeline. I wish I could, and I feel horribly underqualified to even try to guess at a response. I know there are people so keenly working on it for so long. There's been a lot of drugs and ones that have been approved in the United States that just haven't held up yet to the promise that we've hoped. Some of the antibodies therapies that have come along, and so they're not approved here. And really, when you look at the studies, it's not clear that is where we should be looking, I should say. So there's lots happening all the time, including here in Halifax. But I hope that it'll be sooner than later, but I really don't know. Yeah, it's a great question though.
Thanks so much for your questions, everyone, and for your answers from the Oh, we've got another one? Okay. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Paul.
Hey, you go ahead, sir.
So I wondered about your reaction about drugs, taking drugs when you've been diagnosed. I ask because Alzheimer's runs in our family, big time. Some of you would have known Alexa McDonough, my sister. And she had serious symptoms when she was diagnosed. She and I were diagnosed together, or no, tested together, and she failed 12 years ago.
Yeah.
She lived a relatively normal life for a number of years.
Yes.
Not deteriorating. And and it was because of Dr. Rockwood and the drugs she took. Last August, I was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and given a drug. And 3 months after I was diagnosed, I was tested again, all the same tests except different questions. And I had actually improved, not deteriorated, I had improved. And this is a good news story that should be told.
That's a beautiful thing. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. Thank you. And your sister was an absolutely remarkable woman. Absolutely. And I appreciate you sharing that story and her story. And certainly the medications that we have available can help a lot of people. And we do see improvement in the memory symptoms, improvement in function, and improvement or stability in the testing scores on the medication, which is so wonderful to see. So the drugs do work for many people and can help a lot of the symptoms. So I agree. There's options out there. Absolutely, for helping with the symptoms of the disease.
Thank you so much for those questions. Before we wrap for the evening, we've got a couple of more speakers that are going to say a few words. I would now like to invite, Mark Gillis. Mark is the president of the board of directors for the Alzheimer's Society, and also Lindsay Cross, vice president of the board of directors. They're going to come up and say a few words. And you saw them earlier on the video just about an hour ago as well. So Mark and Lindsay, take it away.
Thanks, Paul. And thank you to all the speakers tonight, sincerely, for whether it's sharing personal stories or expertise. It's so important to be able to do that. So thank you. And for your questions that have also been super helpful to engage in the discussion. Thank you to John and his team, obviously putting on the event always. And thank you all for joining in less than ideal weather situation. And for those joining online, thank you all sincerely. Just going off script a little bit, but as board chair, we end up getting caught up, Lindsay, vice chair, John and I, we all talk about things like enterprise risk management and policy handbooks and all these exciting things in our biweekly meetings, because our goal is to really help the organization continue to move forward. You know, we'll talk about terms of reference for a committee of the board for an hour. But it's events like this that really bring us back to earth when it comes to board work and how important the real core reason we're all coming together is here tonight. So thank you for that. I will shed some light on kind of our board composition, in that we're very fortunate to have Dr. Melissa Andrew, who was mentioned earlier, on our board, someone who is advancing the research. We have people who are on the dementia journey themselves on our board. And a question that often comes up when we kind of get into the weeds on things like terms of references for a policy committee, we'll often stop almost every board meeting and say, hold on, how is this helping people on the dementia journey, and quickly redirect to solving as many problems as possible. So I just wanted to kind of shed some light on that before continuing. So since becoming board chair 3 years ago, I've seen the organization change and adapt in many ways. A credit to the leaders and experts who are stewarding the society to support Nova Scotians on the dementia journey. So on behalf of the board, I want to thank John and his team. The Alzheimer's Society has a very clear vision of where we need to be, and the Society's work involves a balance of aspiring for long-term progress while addressing immediate priorities. Above all, John and his team are always working to improve and meet Nova Scotians where they are, because improving access and inclusion is top of mind. Tonight is just one example, inviting people from across the province to register online and join us from the comfort of their homes at no cost. We've come a long way, we've adapted well, and we have solid plans for the future, because we're needed now, unfortunately, more than ever.
So I'm going to speak for a couple of moments and pass it back to Mark. Thank you, Mark. And thank you to all for being here. What a great evening. I definitely learned a lot and appreciate your stories. So to everyone in the room, as someone who is the incoming board chair, I want you to know that I'm deeply committed to supporting the organization moving forward. Because my journey, and I think Mark and I talked, we kind of chuckled about this, but our participation on the board thus far has largely been virtual. We've been on screens, so we've only met twice. And for many of the team members at the society, seeing people in person is still a relatively odd experience. So we're still getting used to this in-person stuff. So because I'm really meeting some of you for the first time, I wanted to go a little bit off script and hopefully take a moment to tell you a bit about my origin story and why I'm really inspired to be here. So I know a couple of you are connected to the long-term care world. Maybe just a show of hands, how many of you have either had a loved one living in a long-term care community, you've worked in long-term care community. It's a big part of our province. It's all about care. So my mother was a continuing care assistant for 30 years. And she worked at a nursing home in Cape Breton, where I'm from, where lots of great people are from. Present tense. So her workplace, which we called her home away from home and her second family, that was where I actually got my first part-time job after school, providing mealtime support to residents, many of whom were on the dementia journey. So it was there that I remember a lovely lady, her name was Virginia. To this day, she still is with me. And that 4-year part-time after school job was the place where I learned about empathy, compassion, and community, all of which the team members at the society, they put those 3 things to work every single day. So since joining the board in 2021, and I would say I also started my role at Shannex at the exact same time. So the world just kind of collided in a way that was very meaningful. I have been amazed by people like you, by the team, and just by the expertise at the society, but also in their network of support. There is a lot of brain power in this room and working to do better. I have been incredibly grateful for so many Nova Scotians like you who will tell their story, who will give us honest feedback, who will tell us what the priorities need to be. And that has really informed our strategic direction moving forward. So thank you. And if you didn't participate in some of those conversations, you still can. We're always listening, and I know the team is always open to a conversation. Also, since 2021, like many of you, I continue to watch a lot of news, and healthcare is a top priority for all of us. So what's inspiring me as we look to the future? Well, beyond all of you in this room and online, I think the camera's over that way. It's quite simple, actually, that a diagnosis can happen or has already happened to all of us. It can happen to anyone. So we have a collective responsibility. I think someone said that earlier. It's up to all of us to enhance the quality of life for Nova Scotians on the dementia journey. And that includes the care partners and the care providers who are navigating the unthinkable. And that's why we cannot rest, and we will not rest until every Nova Scotian has timely, and timely is very important, timely access to culturally specific care and services, no matter where they live in our province on the Cabot Trail, where I go every year once at least. No matter where you live or how you identify, you need and deserve access. So tonight has been an example of how we can all work together to know more, learn from the experts, and connect with one another. Knowledge does change everything. And I'm confident that together with the Society's leadership and with all of your support, we will influence policy. We will inspire dementia-friendly communities. And Nova Scotians will get access to the help they need today. And they'll feel better about having hope for tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. As we celebrate our 40th anniversary this year, as it was mentioned earlier tonight, there's a lot of momentum surrounding the society and its work, as John would be happy to tell you. We've also seen unprecedented levels of community interest in joining the board. There's a role for everyone in this room to go online and get involved in any way you can. If you're interested in learning more, sharing your stories or ideas, please connect with either of us or any member of the ASNS team. Please sign up to receive email updates about important news, upcoming events, and opportunities to contribute. Thanks again for joining us tonight. Special thanks to Paul for hosting the evening and for all of you for sharing your stories and coming out. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks so much to Mark and Lindsay. Just a few more, Mark and Lindsay, pardon me. Missed the S in your name there. Good Cape Brettoner, can't forget that. As a Newfoundlander who's very close. Know what I'm saying? Just want to say thanks again to our speakers. Of course, we've thanked them throughout the evening, but it goes without saying, but thank you so much for your time and your energy, of course, for the event. For our virtual folks, we do have a poll to help us evaluate and also to plan for future events like this one. So if you could, please take a few moments to respond to that poll that's on your screen this evening. And thanks so much for your attention out there across the province as well. If you're here tonight in the room, please find that evaluation form in your bag. So take a moment to fill that out. Of course, the feedback's always appreciated. I know John and everybody on the staff worked so hard to put this event together. So any kind of feedback would be great. Just so that you know as well, the Alzheimer's Society will be sending out a link to the recording of this event. So if you'd like to see yourself on television, by all means, go watch the event, see if you can see yourself on there. I'm standing. You can share that with anyone as well who may benefit from the information that it provides. Thanks to the Alzheimer's Society staff who provided support here tonight and behind the scenes, especially the awareness event as well, working committee chaired by Catherine Shepard. Catherine, where are you? Way to go, Catherine. You're amazing. Jordan and Owen up to my right up there for making us sound and look all good this evening. Thanks so much there from Basil Audio Visual, our producer for the event tonight. Thanks so much. And also Halifax Central Library for hosting it. This is beautiful Paulo Regan Hall as well, this was kind of an intriguing event for me because I've hosted a lot of events over the last decade in Halifax, never one in this space here, but it's a real nice warm room. Very nice and cozy here. So hopefully you enjoyed the event at the Paulo Regan Hall at the Halifax Central Library. So that about wraps up our evening. Thanks so much to everybody for coming. Whether you're my neighbor across the road, who's 5 houses down, evidently, who's just starting the dementia journey with their family, whether you're watching virtually, whether you're in the room with us, we're all on this journey together. So thanks for building community tonight, and knowledge changes everything. Thanks so much, and we'll see you again next time.